Good day, everyone. Welcome to the deep dive where we explore the topic of can we really heal? I'm really excited today that we have a wonderful guest named Krystalore or Krystalore, depending on where you're from. You can pronounce it in specific ways. Cruz, who is going to tell her journey of survival, her journey of recovery, her journey through the military, her journey as an NFL cheerleader, her journey as a survivor of abuse, her journey to now being what I would say is one of the most accomplished runners, fitness advocates. I'm really excited to have her today because I love hearing about how people have traversed through different types of traumas and different adversities throughout their life. So really come down into the deep dive of, can we really heal? How do you overcome all that we face even as young child? And for those of you that have been listening to our wonderful episodes, we really explore at AHA the emotional root. When do we experience that first big P? And so today we're going to explore what that looks like for you, and also for you at home, start to think about your big P. When did we suddenly change who we are to morph, to survive, when this pain stays in the body? So I'm really excited to have you here today. I can't wait to dive into your background. And please introduce yourself to our wonderful listeners on the deep dive.
Oh, well, thank you, Janice, for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. So I'm Krystalore Crews with Cruz Beyond Limits Consulting, and I'm a life, fitness, and business accelerator. I'm on a mission to help empower everyone on the planet put themselves and their health first for just 34 minutes a day.
Wow.
So you can reduce the stress and overwhelm of life and live a more fulfilling life.
Love that. Okay, so why 34 minutes? I gotta know.
Like everyone's first question.
I know, and I'm like, it's okay, 30. I've heard 7 minutes a day. I'm like, okay, give it to me. 34 minutes. Where did that come from?
34 minutes. I'm going to break this down real good for you. So 2 minutes in the morning, starting with gratitude, starting with a powerful I am statement. Who can I make smile today? And how am I going to move my body for 30 minutes today? And then we map out those 30 minutes, whatever that looks like. So I teach high intensity interval training and kickboxing. So I have a virtual fitness program, a virtual boutique across the world. So I have women, and I, as a survivor of abuse, I had to use some of those uppercuts before. And so now I love to train women to empower themselves through self-defense. So then we have 2 minutes in the evening. So every evening we do a reflection. How did we feel today? What emotions came up? What got in the way of accomplishing our goals? Who did we make a difference and an impact in? Because many times we keep going, and I'm sure we'll dive into this in my story, but we keep going and going and going and going, and sometimes that's our default. And stopping to really reflect and give ourselves credit for the things that we are accomplishing. So that's the 2 minute reflection in the evening. And then if things got in the way, or maybe we're just not quite there yet, what can we do differently tomorrow?
Okay, so I have so many questions for you because let's first dive into maybe some of the, I'm not sure, fun or not so fun, depends I guess on who you ask or what you feel. So you were an NFL cheerleader. Now, had you come to that from high school? Like, was that sort of a progression? Was that a pinnacle? Tell me a little bit about that experience. And then I also want to say, I understand it's very, very competitive. So like, how do you maintain your sense of self in that kind of a environment?
Yeah, so I've been dancing since I was 2, since I could walk, basically. My mom put me right into dance. And this is a part of my story because I was a dancer, and then I would try pretty much every sport. I was like a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I was on the bowling team. I played tennis. I sang in the choir. But then I quickly realized I loved dancing and I loved performing. And I was a gymnast. And so when I got into cheerleading in high school, so I cheered through high school, and then I cheered in college in my undergrad. And my aunt had cheered for the NFL. And so I had a friend who actually tried out, and I was like, oh, my aunt did that. Maybe I could do that too. And so I tried out. There were 500 women that tried out when I did, and they picked 38 of us. And so at the young age of 22, I learned that I have to leave the house fully made up. I had to be on, I had to be a role model in the community. And I was front and center. I'm 4'11" and 3/4. I'm a small human. So I was front and center like all the time. And I had to perform. And
Wow.
it was just such a beautiful experience. But I learned etiquette. I learned public speaking. I learned how to dress. I learned how to handle nasty fans. Because in Buffalo, is for the Buffalo Bills, Buffalo, we start. I don't say we because I don't partake in this, but our fans start tailgating at 7 a.m. for a 1 o'clock game.
Oh my God.
So so we learned really quickly how to handle stress and pressure and body image and how to stay in shape, how to perform, how to turn things on and off, and be on all the time.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned Buffalo because I mentioned we're Canadian, and so we always sort of adopt Buffalo as our home, although it does have the original Tim Hortons. And so for Canadians, that's like, that might as well be the Mecca, for a Canadian is the Tim Hortons. In my first startup, I actually worked with the Buffalo Sabres and had so I got to go to Buffalo, sit in the box at the Sabres game, get to know, much of the people that were working in the sports organization, which I think at the time they had just bought the Bills. So I can appreciate, especially being there, community. Again, it feels so Canadian when I'm in Buffalo because it's just has that Canadian and that ethic. So I love that you mentioned the etiquette and that part of it growing up there. Okay, so then how did you go from there to the military? That's what I'm like NFL cheerleader, military. How does that even happen?
I love the big question mark that everybody has for me. And what's so ironic is I was actually in the military first. So I joined right after 9/11, and
Wow.
I joined May of 2002. So I just celebrated 21 years. I'm still serving part-time.
Wow.
So yes. And so I joined really at first to pay for college. And a friend of mine and I joined just right after 9/11. We're like, let's do this. They're going to help us pay for college. We picked the shortest school to go to training and come back to finish college. And here I am 21 years later, still serving. And she is still too, but she's in the Army now. So it's just been a wild journey.
Okay, so I really want to dive into this because we know in the military, on both sides of the border, I'm an honorary captain for the Royal Canadian Navy. So that is a role that I have. And we've been talking within, even the Canadian Armed Forces around mental health and emotional health and healing. I know now the United States has taken an initiative for emotional wellness and mental health awareness campaigns. I know that that's being enacted because of a poor soldier who took his life. So how do you feel as a woman in the military? Where does healing and this conversation around emotional healing? Because I'm sure it's quite a dichotomy, right? One, you have to be tough and strong and mentally there to do the work that you do. But then on the other side of the coin, the toll it takes on our emotional health and mental health. And then being a woman, or even I would say a person of color or diverse LGBTQ plus within that's another dynamic. Do you feel that it's evolved? How do you view what is going on in the military today versus when you started 22 years ago?
Yeah, so it certainly has evolved. And what's interesting and very parallel to how I grew up as a dancer, I was meant to perform and I was meant to be on and look a certain way and act a certain way and not speak and be seen, right? And so there were times throughout my career that I was told, you will sit in the corner and not speak until you're spoken to. I'm not trying to paint a negative picture. However, we have evolved. We used to have ashtrays in our desks. And we would have dance parties after work, in the office, disco ball, it was a different military back then.
Wow.
And so I learned, I toughened up real quick. And so that really did shape a lot of kind of how I am today is a lot of those younger years. And especially when I was a cheerleader, because they did that same thing. They were like, what? Who are you? This doesn't make sense. You have too much energy. Like, you don't fit the mold of a soldier. And so for literally I would say the first 16 years of my career, I lived in a body and in a position that I didn't quite fit in.
Wow.
And honestly, it wasn't until I moved away from home and met the man of my dreams, who's also in the military. He broke all my rules, by the way. But he
That's always wonderful.
I dreamt of him. He's a hunk. So we moved away from home, and I had to move away from my career, my full-time career in the military, my life, my friends, my family, everything,
Wow.
to go to be with him and move away with his military career. And so we made that choice as a couple. And with that became a promotion for me.
Oh, interesting.
This was such a blessing because in the worst, it's not the worst, this is one of the worst points of my life, where I had an extreme identity crisis and I felt very alone. And I had to really rebuild who I was. Crystal out of the uniform, Crystal as a military spouse, Crystal away like from her friends and family and her parents. And this promotion sent me on a journey as a leadership development professional in the military. So they put me through all of the certifications to be trained as a coach, emotional intelligence, diversity and inclusion. So this was literally 6 years ago now, almost, where I was selected to be a trainer for professional development and help coach and mentor all the soldiers.
Wow.
Really quickly, I had to pick up all the pieces, all the breadcrumbs that I unpeeled the layers, did the hard work, and they saw me like rapid pace. And so I ended up building an entire curriculum, a train the trainer curriculum for the entire country for the military. So we have come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. Yeah. But what you share about, it must be difficult, especially for, people in marginalized groups. Women are 10% of the veteran population, right? And so it's always a challenge to feel like you don't fit in, but to really find your own voice and find your own path, and not have to really prove yourself, really just you being you, uniquely you, should be enough. And, we still have some work to do, but I think we've really taken the initiatives and come a long way. So I'm happy to
so terrific. Again, because, the thing we always say at AHA is that every step leads you into really what you were always meant to be and do. And even if things break our heart, they serve as the ingredients that we often need in order to transform that into what is your ultimate calling. And so at AHAVA, we believe the first 10 years of your life really set the stage for everything that you were ever meant to be and do. And I love that, like, this all started at 2, and here you are sort of going through this journey of that. It's really interesting. And then, so I do want to talk about how this all sort of came crashing down in some cases too.
Yes.
And things that were, I find it always interesting because sometimes, I've been studying emotional pain for the last 30 years. And the thing that I've always found fascinating, whatever we covet, so whatever we've used as been the main gift or the tool that has got us from point A to point B, whatever that is. Sometimes it's our intellect, sometimes it's our mobility, sometimes it's our beauty, sometimes it's our money, sometimes whatever it is. It's the one place that we lose oftentimes when a higher calling is coming forward, meaning that you are being called to do something else, which means that it's going to break you before you can get to the top of the mountain. And for you, that has been a dancer, physical, you've been athletic, you've been a cheerleader, everything within your physical prowess, and then all of a sudden you can't move.
Yep.
It's fascinating. So tell me a little bit about that, because I think that people think that when we're getting broken in some cases, or something is getting taken away, the rug's getting pulled out, We have a saying: you get a whisper, a 2x4, or a truck. I always say, take the whisper because the truck will come. Like, listen to the whisper. Don't wait for the truck, but you got a truck. Probably had a whisper, probably had a 2x4, but like maybe a bulldozer truck. 3 dump trucks. Like, over you. So tell me a little bit about that, because people always think we look at the moment as, and this is where we talk about moving into our codependency. We can look at this from a victim perspective. We can look at this, in our codependency versus saying, what am I really left here to do? Like, what do I, in this moment, everything's been stripped away and you chose to do what? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So just to go back to the NFL days. So I was in a runway show for Spirit Halloween. It was October 31st of 2005, well before the internet. I'll share why that's important in a moment. But I was on a runway show. The black stiletto shoes just started coming back out. And I bought the cheapest ones from Payless because that's all I could afford at the time. And I woke up on November 1st and my right baby toe was bigger than my big toe.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it was extremely painful. And in Buffalo in November, it snows. So you kind of got to wear shoes.
Yeah.
And so I knew that something was wrong with my foot, but I went to the doctor and they're like, you're doing too much, honey. Stop working out so much. Stop wearing those shoes. Like, just suck it up, right?
Wow.
And I heard this a lot in the military. You just suck it up and you keep going, right? Then I started getting pain in my knee, my right knee, and then I got pain in my left knee. And then I got pain in my right shoulder, and then my left shoulder. And then I had lockjaw for 3 months. And I couldn't no longer walk within 2 weeks. Yeah.
That's a bulldozer.
Yeah.
Like yours were like whisper, 2x4, truck, boom.
Yes.
Wow. Nuts.
So I spent 6 months in a wheelchair. And while they tried to figure out what was wrong with me. And I was in my senior year of my undergrad. I was just starting my military career. I was at the height of my NFL career. Like, I thought I had it all going on. I was in a very toxic relationship with Max at the time, too. So we were together for 6 years, and it was a very challenging time in my life. And once I kind of painted that picture and I had to look back at that time, I was overtrained, burned out. I was in fight or flight mode. I was not healthy. I was in a toxic relationship with myself, even more than the person that I was living with. And I never felt like I had a voice until I went to the ER when I had so much joint fluid in this wheelchair. So, and I share this because I help a lot of women who are like, oh, you Krystalore, you're this crazy runner girl, or you have this 6-pack abs that can never keep up with you. I can't work out with you. I've been there more times than one. So this is just one instance, one dump truck. I've been bulldozed a couple times. So anyways, I went to the ER and there was this beautiful angel who was there, and she said, this doesn't seem right. I said, tell me about it. She's like, you're an athlete. What is going on? That look that you said to me, like, this doesn't add up. And I'm like, I know. So she helped me advocate for myself and my health, and she empowered me to work with my doctors. Wow. The medication was steroid injections. It took endless amounts of prednisone. I had to take a chemotherapy pill to be able to walk. So I went from front and center NFL cheerleader to wheelchair, shopping for my first apartment alone in a wheelchair. So it was tough, to say the least.
Definitely. And that trauma of that, plus the relationship, and which I think, again, I'd like to talk about that, because I think there's so many young women and men today, people that are entering some of these relationships, when we're super young, we're really hopeful. And I love what you said, that really the toxic relationship with ourselves. Because if we trace back trauma, and we always say, whatever cast of character is in front of you, the original roots of that were pretend. This is just another character to affirm or reaffirm something that you believe about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really what can happen, right? So I want to talk about that concept of the toxic relationship with the self, because I think that that is a journey that people go on where they really eventually have to look at themselves and then ask the question of like, what do I want? And who am I? And can I love myself by my breath? That's what I always say. And everything else is gravy. Because here you are a performer, you mentioned that, always performing, showing up in front of the crowd. Your physicality gets taken away, a toxic relationship. And you really do have to confront the self and say, can I be loved by my breath? If I don't do any of these things again, I think that's the fundamental question. Was that circulating in your brain, and this, all of this was compounding, obviously, and showing up in your body?
It was. And I want to tell the happy ending to the story because I don't want to leave it there and just let it. I know we want to marinate there and feel it. But, you know, in those moments where I finally found my voice, and as much as we perform, and I just literally, I was like, they called me a caged pit bull in the military too. They drew Hitler mustaches because I just had so much energy and ideas, and I'm creative, I'm strategic, and I was put in boxes for so long that I never thought I had my own voice. And I was in this other relationship where it was always a competition. And so my worthiness just got jacked down even more. It just kept getting beat down. And I was never going to amount to anything good that I wanted to go after. And so finally, when I recognized I had other people on my team that were going to cheer me on, that were going to show me that there's hope, in those moments, I was like, there has to be another way. So what can I do with what I've got has been the biggest question for me in all of these moments of challenge and change in my life. And that literally, I was like this, I literally had a pill box this big, bigger than my head. I had ulcers burning. I had to take more medication. I'm like, this can't be the end. This can't be the rest of my life. And so the medication that I was on was disqualifying. So they tried to kick me out of the military. So I was losing an identity of being in that relationship, losing the identity of being an athlete, losing the identity of being a dancer and an NFL cheerleader, going out on my own. And then I was losing the military too. Wow. So I was like, no. Hang on, time out, doc. What can we do? Like, you've already poked and prodded at me for 6 months. Like, why not try some other medications, some other modalities? And I ended up working with my doctors, and it took an entire year. And I got off of all of the medication.
Wow.
And I read Arthritis for Dummies. So, because we didn't have Dr. Google back then. So right. I read Arthritis for Dummies. I got therapy. I got help. I asked for help. I started journaling. I started writing. And I got off of all of that medication.
Amazing.
And behind me, 26 marathons, a 50-mile race. I don't even take ibuprofen to this day.
Wow, that's so good. Yay. See, there's the light. Okay, well, at this point, I'm going to do your magic whiteboard. Now,
okay.
One thing I just want to ask at the beginning of everything, like, you've accomplished a lot. You've gone through a lot. Have you wrote a book? Have you did a documentary? What is it that you sort of are setting your sights on next? Like, what is the thing you need to manifest and want to create?
Okay, so I've already created a retreat. So I have a 6-day all-inclusive women's wellness retreat on the top of a mountain in Costa Rica.
Okay.
So that's been a beautiful business baby that I've birthed. And so I hosted 3 of them last year. I hosted one this year already in May, and I have another one coming up in September.
Okay.
And I share that. What's that?
What is it called?
It's called the Revive and Thrive Retreat.
Okay.
So it's an all-inclusive experience. It's 6 women for 6 days. And you go from strangers to sisters in 6 days.
Okay.
However, in my transition, so I transitioned off of active duty to move away from everything. I wanted to separate myself from the military for a while. I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. That's where I built my business. And I started building communities. And then I built a global brand during the pandemic. And so all of these clients, I grew so close to them, and I helped transform their lives. And they're like, we got to meet in person. So I was like, I want to build this retreat. So I did. And the one thing that keeps coming back, though, as I actually retired from the military last year, and then I pulled a Tom Brady, and I pulled my retirement on the last day. And one of this going into retirement, reaching that next chapter, this evolution of finding oneself and that next level version of oneself is really where my magic sweet spot is. It's like helping people ignite that too, just like you. And so what keeps coming up for me is serving the female veteran space and the military spouse space.
Okay.
And even like NFL spouses too, right? And profession, because we live sometimes in the shadows, and we don't always feel like we have a voice or our own identity. And so this is just a beautiful group of women that I really want to pour into, and it's been on my heart. Okay. And I'll share that I have been sharing it, and I got 4 incredible sponsors to send 3 female veterans to my retreat in May. So my next step is either whether I go the nonprofit route or just collect more corporate sponsors to be able to pour into our veteran population, especially veterans.
Okay, so let's dive into the magic board.
Okay,
and then let's see where it takes us. Okay, so I have been doing these boards for well over a decade. It spent 25 years to design the healing modality to heal early pain. And so I studied relapse rates. I studied what happens to people along their journey. And the thing that I felt was missing was really, how do you take the data that is born to you, that you don't pick? So anything before your 10th birthday is data that a human doesn't pick. We don't pick that data. We don't pick our name, our hair color, our eyes. We don't pick our parents, our siblings. We don't pick our first grade teacher. But yet it's the very data that we rarely use in anything that we want to create. It's not data that we go back and revisit. It's not what we look at. So I spent in total now 12 years perfecting an algorithm and a math situation to see if I could. So we have books, movies, awards won. The people that have created out of the AHA methodology of this magic board, they've made companies, they've made ideas. I've made mine. It's pretty much foolproof. And usually within the first 30 minutes, we know what it wants you to know. It's not psychic. It's not woo-woo. It's just your data. Okay? I am not a psychic. I am not a medium. I want to say that straight up. It's math. It's patterns in the math. And it's okay. And where are you on the birth order?
What do you mean?
Are you firstborn?
Oh, yes. Firstborn. Oh, yes.
Firstborn of how many?
2. So I have a younger brother. He's 3 years younger.
Okay. And you have a younger brother. Awesome. And where were you born?
In a small town outside of Buffalo. So it's called New Fane.
New Fane?
New Fane. Fane.
Oh, cool. Okay. And your parents' names?
Kelly with an I.
Is that her full name?
Yes.
Okay, so no longer version, shortened to Kelly with an I, nothing?
Her middle name's Ray, so Kelly Ray, but she goes by Kelly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And your dad's name?
So my stepfather's name is Bob.
What was your biological father's name?
Earl.
And when did Earl leave the picture?
6. I was 6.
You were 6. Did you maintain a relationship with Earl?
We tried.
No.
But
And so was your brother also born to Earl? So both of you were born to Earl?
And his name's Earl.
And
my brother's name's Earl as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And then your stepfather's name was what?
Bob.
Robert? And why did they separate?
That's a good question. I don't have many memories. He was working a lot. And they weren't meant to be.
They weren't meant to be. And you've seen him sporadically? Is he still alive?
I've seen him, yes. I've seen him a couple times. But I saw him the day I graduated high school and like one other time since then. When I didn't invite him to my wedding, is when the last time I really talked to him, because he wanted to walk me down the aisle. And so it was an ultimatum. Either he walks me down the aisle or he doesn't come. Yeah, so that was it.
And did you know his side of the family at all?
Yes. So his mom is where I got my name from. His sister was my aunt, who was a Jill. So I'm very close with that side of the family still. My whole family is.
Oh, really? So really close, just not him. Where was he on the birth order?
He was first as well.
So he's in one?
Mm-hmm.
Of how many?
3.
Of 3. Interesting. And then your mom. So where was your mom on the birth order?
She was one of 4.
And where were they born?
Same town.
Same town?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so interesting. And are they both German on both sides?
No, my mom is Irish.
Ah, okay. And what did your dad do professionally, biological?
What did he what?
Do professionally?
He was a mechanic, a car mechanic.
And was he have brothers or sisters, or just brothers and sisters?
He was one brother, one sister.
One brother, one sister. Brother second or brother last?
Brother second.
Okay, interesting. And you were close with your grandmother?
Yes, still to this day.
Still to this day? She's still alive?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's wonderful. And your grandfather?
He had passed.
He passed.
Mm-hmm.
And then on your mom's side, is she brothers and sisters? One of 4, so that's
one of
a lot.
4 sisters. All 4 sisters.
Oh my gosh, what a dynamic. How many years separate all the women?
2 or 3 years, 2 years, I think.
Interesting. All girls.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a lot of ones, which is interesting. And then like you're also the firstborn. So it's an interesting numbers. But when you were talking, you have a lot of things at 2. You started to dance at 2. It was interesting. You mentioned 22. You mentioned like lots of things around 2, which I thought was really interesting, which again, we'll dive into a little bit further. How would you describe your parents? You don't have a lot of memories of Earl. Any
really
memories of him?
My memories are really of my stepfather, and he was always there. When
did he enter the picture?
When I was 6.
When you were 6, okay.
Yeah. So we, he always picked us up from school. He would pick us up from the babysitter if my mom was still at work. He helped us do our homework. And he's a big teddy bear. He's a bodybuilder, super into fitness, very regimented. So very, very calculated and very regimented.
Interesting.
And my mom is the people person. She's the mayor. Everyone loves her. She's got the most energy. She runs half marathons too. She's one of my clients actually. And she works out every single day, tries to eat healthy and just make people be happier.
Wow. And how would they have described you as a kid?
Good question. I would say happy. I was always dancing, always, around in my tutu. I had to have the jelly shoes. I had to have the right socks. Everything had to match. And, I just was the jelly shoes. I forgot about those. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because again, there's something to be said about the metaphor of words when you look at them, right? So like jelly shoes is interesting just because you've had things with the body. When you think about jelly, right? Things go to jelly. It's kind of what happened to some of your joints. Like like there's an interesting metaphor in this concept of jelly shoes.
Joint fluid, by the way, looks like jelly.
Looks like jelly. So
I don't recommend it for anyone.
It's really fascinating because again, like this jelly shoes feels like a really potentially the name of your second book. It's jelly shoes. But there is some healing here, obviously, with Earl.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so what was he like?
I don't remember.
No? Does anybody talk about him?
No.
The grandmother?
Much easier. Nope. He's not to be spoken. We don't even mention his name.
Really? And why is that, do you think?
I think it's easier. It's avoidance.
Mm.
And there's patterns from his father and then to my brother of just abandonment. And he up and left. He moved to Vegas. He literally moved to the opposite side of the country and really never looked back.
Interesting. And your mother never described him to you?
He just was never around. So she really raised us by herself.
Wow. Mm-hmm. What would your grandmother say about her son?
She's the only one that still talks to him. Mm-hmm. So she lives two lives almost, in a sense. She has our life with us and then the life with him. So we don't really talk about him.
Okay. So it's really interesting on your board, by the way. So Jelly Shoes, I think, is the journey of two lives, is what it's called, because you've kind of had two lives as well. Mm-hmm. There's a pattern with this because your mother's also had a second life. So she had the first, and then she had this wonderful Robert come into her life and that component of it. But there's Earl, and for you as well, you had the toxic relationship. Now you have someone really loving. And it seems, again, that there seems to be this real sort of parallel in everyone's experiences is this journey of two lives. Mm-hmm. I also think that what you're focused on doing with the women, they have two lives. They have pre and they have post. Everything seems to be this journey of two lives. And that's seems to be the theme of your life. And so how do you marry the two sides of two lives? How do we marry the past? In your family's case was avoidance. Don't speak of it, doesn't exist, but you know better than anyone that will fester, that becomes a thorn. And how do you take them through the journey of this first half of life into the second half of life? So there's a really interesting book called by Richard Rohr, if you've not read it. It's called Falling Upward. It's a really beautiful book that really dives into this expression of how do you have this first half of life and second half of life? And I think, again, because your grandmother's name is also your name, and she really has these two lives. And so Jelly Shoes and the subtext underneath is called The Journey of Two Lives. Love it. And so I think that that's something for you to pray on and to look into. And I think that part of what you're doing within these treats is really how do you marry that? How do you say goodbye to that and then welcome this? And Earl has a lost gift. So if you have a chance, I would potentially ask the grandma about what he was like as a boy. Something I think happened to Earl around 3 years old. And so when we look at our golden triangle data, we're really looking at what was going on in the time period where someone leaves themselves behind. A father doesn't wake up one day and say, I don't want to have my children anymore. They don't do that. They were born that way and they were raised that way. And that means that they had a big P, what we call the big P. I wanted to study everyone's big P. So a big P is really made up of three components. Your component, who do you believe withheld or took away or was responsible for a lack of love and belonging? And who is the other factor in this? We call this our codependent triangle, the victim, martyr, perpetrator side of it. But if you flip this triangle over, you have a golden triangle. So Earl is really interesting. I think there's something that happened around the age of 3. What year was he born?
61.
So 1964 is a key year for you. And for you, again, I know that you had a brother that was born, but everything comes up for you as twos. Like something at 2, 22, at the age of 2, you started to dance. Everything sort of shifted for you at 2. Probably also an old soul and became aware that perhaps your dad isn't what you thought he was supposed to be, and you shut off from it. So you disconnected from that part of the self, and 2. And so since you were born in 83, your other golden triangle year is 85. Now, for your mother, it was really interesting. 3 just keeps coming up as well for her a lot. She was, again, the oldest of 4, so she had 3 younger sisters. It's really interesting. I'd be curious to know when the second one was born after her, if you know that date. That was probably, again, where you have this really consistent pattern that for your father and your mother and for you, things shifted when you're really little, like little people. And so you don't have a lot of memories. And so when people don't have a lot of memories, you know that their big P happened usually within 0 to 2. That time period, they shut off from their present experience very early on and learned how to disconnect with it, which means that oftentimes trauma will then manifest in the body in physical ways later on because it's been there for a long time. So again, this idea of jelly shoes is fascinating because some of your pain points actually went into your quote unquote jelly. So there's this really interesting metaphor with that. So the other year, what year was your mother born?
61.
61 as well.
They were the same age. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's how I know. That's how I was able to. And my stepfather's born in the same year too.
So like you have lots of 6s and 1s. And so I would have said again, he left when you were 6. So there could be some exploration for you right up until 1989. So between 2 and 6 are your kind of coveted years where there's some really cool ingredients for you to pull from. And then again for your mom, 1964. Very similar year to your dad as well. But eventually, so what you sort of see with a golden triangle is there's data for you. So meaning that if you were to dive into here this week, I would make a playlist. Call the playlist Jelly Shoes. So the playlist should be called Jelly Shoes. You should look for all music from these years of 85 to 89, 1961, since they're all born in 61. That's really interesting. All the 3 people, there's 3 connective tissues to 64. So you also have a 3-year sort of bucket there that's kind of fascinating. When you go into that, you're looking for things around what was happening to veterans then with women. How did they marry their first husband? These years, there's lost gifts there, meaning that someone started something but didn't finish it. They thought of an idea, but it didn't go all the way. There was probably also going to be some really amazing former veteran women. I think, again, like women from that were left behind, that were really like fighting the good fight, especially in 61 to 64. I think it's just, did laws change? You're kind of looking at all of these ingredients because the theme of the journey of 2 lives, which is you and everyone that is in your life has had 2 lives, and also the people that you're trying to help. So there's this perpetual theme. But definitely Jelly Shoes, The Journey of 2 Lives is... I think the name of your second book. And it's how do you go back into this and marry these 2 halves? And Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward, is a really, really beautiful book that talks about these 2 halves, but definitely Jelly Shoes. So this episode of this wonderful deep dive is going to be called Jelly Shoes, The Journey of 2 Lives. And it's you. It's your ingredients. So this is, usually we do these words, it takes about an hour and 2 hours, but a lot there right away. Those years hold some amazing secrets for you. And so try to be in the music. Also grab some Irish and German food if you can over the next couple of weeks. What were they eating back in? You know, you just want to kind of bring in that comfort food for your soul, your little girl self. You want to look at, if you can find a pair of jelly shoes.
I'm thinking about it. I'm going to bring it back with the lace socks that fold over.
With the lace socks, like you got to I would love for you to do one, like even your final marathon with a pair of jelly shoes around you, like something that, you know, really is. I think it also could potentially be your logo going forward is these jelly shoes. I think there's just so much in that for you. It brings in your dancing roots, your little girl self, all of the parts of you. So there's some amazing ingredients. So thank you for being a guest on the deep dive. I hope you have found the board interesting. The board never lies. I will tell you that. The board never lies. So even though you may not want to go back into that with Earl, we got to send some love to Earl and just throw that fish
Not
back.
like the Dixie Chicks?
No.
The opposite of Dixie Chicks. Okay,
Absolutely.
got it.
Yeah. There's he's carrying a pearl of wisdom in the Earl, and so he's not all that you think that he is. So you never know. So ask the grandma all about what he was like between 3 and 6. It's the only thing you need to know about Earl.
Okay.
And you're going to just find some missed ingredients for you. That's all you need to see him as a little boy between 3 and 6, because that's where he's lost. Okay. Thank you again for being a guest. It was wonderful to meet you and hear this story.
Thank you. Likewise.